It's like I said, the gentleman that I knew for years was ecstatic to serve his country, to meet the love of his life, to have children, and I'd never seen any signs of this part of Brad ever.
On December 15th, 2014, 7 beautiful souls were gunned down on this quiet home in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Although one person would later survive the carnage, the pain and trauma left behind would last forever. This tragedy would soon be remembered as one of the most painful and brutal family massacres the country had ever seen. And what's even sadder is that, while researching this, I realized there wasn't much coverage about it online. So today, we're not letting this one fade into silence. We're here to remember the family, the victims, and the story behind it all. For context, if you've never been to Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, let me give you a little backdrop of this place. In the year 2014, about 815,000 people lived here. It's a county that leans toward the comfortable side economically. Around that time, the average household income was roughly $103,000 a year. While Montgomery County isn't the richest in the country, it's certainly more well-off than most. Many neighborhoods are filled with neatly kept houses, safe streets, and well-funded schools. It's the kind of place where families hope to build stable lives and enjoy quiet weekends. But beneath that calm, there are still pockets of people struggling to make ends meet. Families dealing with job losses, divorces, and the rising cost of living. And at the heart of it all was the Stone family. To anyone who knew them back then, Bradley William Stone and his wife Nicole seemed like an ordinary couple building a future together. They met years earlier when both were young and full of hope. Friends would later say that Bradley adored Nicole. She was his anchor, the person who kept him grounded even after his years in the military. Eventually, they got married and built a life together in Montgomery County. They welcomed 2 beautiful daughters who became the center of their world. To neighbors, the Stones looked like the picture of an American dream. Bradley was a proud father. He'd often be seen playing with his little girls in the yard or taking them out for ice cream. Nicole, a loving and attentive mother, was known for her warmth and her devotion to her children. But like many relationships, especially those strained by time, responsibility, and unspoken pain, things began to change. Bradley had served as a Marine reservist and had even been deployed to Iraq. Though he returned home physically safe, friends noticed that something in him wasn't quite the same. The easygoing man Nicole once knew started becoming more distant, more irritable, and at times unpredictable. Their marriage eventually began to crumble under the weight of those unseen struggles. By the time they decided to separate, both were emotionally exhausted. Yet despite the split, they tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the sake of their daughters. Bradley wanted to remain an active father, but custody disputes soon began. And with each court appearance, tensions only grew worse. But before we dive deeper into that part of his life, let's take a step back and look at Bradley's military background, because that chapter shaped a large part of who he became. As mentioned earlier, Stone had enlisted in the United States Marine Corps Reserve in 2002, serving mainly as a meteorologist. He was part of the 3rd Battalion, 14th Marines, a reserve artillery battalion based in Philadelphia. His service took him overseas, with one deployment to Iraq that began on April 17, 2008, and ended on July 2nd of the same year. Though his time there was relatively short, it left a lasting mark on him. He returned home later that year, and while he officially left active service, he remained on individual Ready Reserve status until 2011. When he finally separated from the Marines, he held the rank of sergeant, a respected title that reflected his dedication and discipline. But the man who came home was not the same one who left. Stone reportedly suffered from combat-related injuries and psychological scars that lingered long after his uniform was folded away. He sought help through the Veterans Affairs system, receiving treatment for both physical pain and mental health struggles. On December 8th, just 1 week before the tragedy, he met with a psychiatrist at a VA medical center. According to medical reports, he showed no signs of homicidal thoughts at that time. To the professionals who saw him, he appeared stable, but the storm inside him was far from calm. In the years after his return, Bradley's personal life unraveled. Alcohol became one of his coping mechanisms, and his struggles with substance use soon caught up with him. He had multiple driving under the influence arrests, one in 2001, another in 2004, and a third in April 2013 after crashing his vehicle while intoxicated. He pleaded guilty later that year and was placed in a county rehabilitation program specifically for veterans. The program was meant to help him rebuild his life and stay sober, but his progress was inconsistent. By this time, his marriage to Nicole had already fallen apart. The two officially separated in 2012, marking the end of what had once been a loving union. But life moved quickly for Bradley, perhaps too quickly. Within just 2 years of the separation, in August 2013, he remarried and even welcomed a child with his new wife. On the surface, it looked like he was moving forward. A new marriage, a new baby, and another chance at stability. However, those close to him would later say he never seemed content. The old wounds, the trauma from war, the guilt, the drinking, and the bitter custody battle with Nicole continued to haunt him. The stress of juggling two families, legal responsibilities, and his own inner turmoil was pushing him to his limit. In the weeks leading up to the tragedy, there were signs that something was deeply wrong. Neighbors recalled hearing loud arguments late at night, and some said they had seen Bradley pacing outside his home, talking to himself. One friend, a fellow veteran, mentioned that Bradley often spoke about feeling cornered, as if everyone, from the court system to Nicole's relatives, was trying to take his children away. On the outside, he tried to keep a sense of control, attending therapy sessions, taking prescribed medication, and going through a veteran's rehabilitation program after a DUI conviction. But beneath that calm surface, something inside him had fractured beyond repair. In the early hours of December 15, 2014, that fracture finally broke. The air was biting cold, and the small Pennsylvania town of Souderton was still and quiet. But inside Bradley's mind, chaos was roaring. At approximately 3:30 in the morning, armed with 2 handguns, a .40 caliber Heckler & Koch, and a 9mm Beretta, and a knife, he began his deadly route. His first stop was the home of his former sister-in-law, Patricia Hill, and her husband, Aaron. The couple lived with their 2 teenage children in a cozy suburban house where Christmas decorations still hung from the windows. They had gone to bed expecting an ordinary night, unaware that tragedy was minutes away. According to investigators, Stone forced his way inside and immediately launched a violent attack. The details later revealed in the affidavit painted a horrifying scene. Patricia and Aaron were killed first, followed by their 14-year-old daughter, who never had a chance to escape. Their 17-year-old son, though gravely wounded by deep lacerations and blunt force trauma, miraculously survived by pretending to be unconscious. He later told authorities he could hear his family being attacked before everything went silent. It would be nearly 5 hours before neighbors discovered the carnage. By that time, Stone had already moved on to his next destination, the home of his former mother-in-law, Joanne Hill, in Lansdale. It was around 4:25 a.m. when police later estimated the second set of killings took place. Joanne and her elderly mother were both found dead, their home ransacked and quiet. Neighbors didn't hear gunfire, only faint thuds and the sound of a door slamming shut. The speed and precision of the attack suggested that Stone knew exactly where everyone lived and exactly how to reach them. The rampage wasn't over. Less than half an hour later, Stone drove to Lower Salford Township, to Nicole's apartment. It was here, in the home of the woman he once vowed to love, that his rage reached its peak. At around 4:55 a.m., the calm of the suburban neighborhood was shattered by the sound of gunshots. Neighbors jolted awake, startled by shouting and crying. Through frosted windows, they saw Bradley outside, his silhouette illuminated by the faint glow of porch lights. He was holding his daughters, ushering them toward his car. When one concerned neighbor stepped outside and called out, "Is everything all right?" Bradley turned, his tone strangely calm and measured. "She's hurt pretty bad. We've got to leave," he said before disappearing into the night with the two girls. Inside Nicole's apartment, investigators later found her dead, the .40 caliber handgun lying beside her. The room showed signs of a struggle, overturned furniture, shattered glass, and bloodstains marking the final moments of her life. It was the culmination of years of emotional and psychological turmoil, a final act of vengeance carried out by a man whose world had unraveled completely. By 5:30 that morning, Bradley had returned to Pennsburg, but instead of continuing the violence, he did something unexpected. He dropped his daughters off safely at a neighbor's house. The neighbor, shocked and half asleep, noticed the girls were unharmed but frightened. Bradley assured them that everything was fine, then drove off before anyone could question him further. To many, that moment revealed the twisted logic behind his actions, as if, in his broken mind, he believed he had saved his daughters from the family he blamed for his pain. When police pieced the timeline together, they realized that Stone had executed a meticulously planned attack that spanned multiple towns and left 6 people dead. He had moved from one location to the next with military precision, avoiding detection for hours. As the sun rose over Montgomery County, the reality of what had happened began to set in. Sirens echoed through the quiet streets as law enforcement agencies launched a massive manhunt involving local police, state troopers, SWAT teams, and the FBI. The public was urged to stay indoors, schools were locked down, and roads were closed. Helicopters hovered above wooded areas near Pennsburg, and officers combed through every abandoned structure, believing that Stone, a trained Marine, could survive for days in the wilderness if he wanted to. Authorities warned residents that he was armed, dangerous, and possibly homicidal. As the manhunt stretched into the next day, fear gripped the community. People who knew Bradley were stunned. They remembered him as a polite, quiet man who loved his daughters, especially this guy.
Were there any warning signs at all leading up to this? Any indications that he was being pushed to the brink?
Not to my knowledge. The Brad Stone that I know was the caring guy. He would do anything for anybody. He loved his country. He would, go the extra mile to help anybody out. This is just, it's a total shock to me and to his other friends.
Is there ever anything he had said that maybe you didn't take seriously at the time, or you thought he was just blowing off steam, but in retrospect, maybe suggested that he was planning something violent?
No, never. I mean, I know when he first met Nicole, and she was the love of his life, and like I said, when he's getting ready to enlist into the service, he was so proud of himself.
Is there anything that may have happened to him physically, mentally, whether in Iraq or anywhere else, that may have contributed in any way to this tragedy?
Not to my knowledge. Like I said, the gentleman that I knew for years was ecstatic to serve his country, to meet the love of his life, to have children, and I'd never seen any signs of this part of Brad ever.
By the afternoon of December 15th, 2014, Montgomery County had transformed from a quiet, close-knit community into the center of one of Pennsylvania's largest manhunts in decades. Police officers, SWAT teams, and K-9 units swarmed through the streets of Pennsburg. converging on a modest home where they believed Bradley Stone had barricaded himself. The tension was suffocating. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights sweeping across rooftops as heavily armed officers took up positions behind vehicles and trees. Neighbors watched from their windows, clutching their phones, whispering prayers, and hoping the nightmare would soon be over. But when the tactical team finally breached the house, it was empty. Stone wasn't there. Instead, they found signs that he had been, a few personal belongings, traces of blood, and footprints leading out the back door toward the woods. The realization sent a chill through everyone on the scene. The man they were hunting, a trained Marine with survival experience, had vanished into the freezing Pennsylvania wilderness. That evening, as darkness swallowed the town, new reports began to pour in. Around 8 o'clock, a call came from Doylestown, nearly 30 miles away. A man reported that someone matching Stone's description had tried to carjack him near North Shady Retreat Road and Burpee Road. The suspect, dressed in camouflage and wielding a knife, approached aggressively, demanding the vehicle. The victim, who happened to be legally armed, pulled out his concealed handgun and fired several shots in self-defense. The armed man then bolted into the woods, disappearing as quickly as he appeared. For a brief moment, it seemed the manhunt had a lead. Police units rushed to Doylestown, their sirens echoing through the night as tactical teams set up search perimeters. The area was immediately locked down, with officers combing the dense, snow-covered woods. Flashlights cut through the dark, canine units tracked faint scents, and infrared-equipped helicopters hovered above, scanning for body heat signatures. Residents were ordered to shelter in place, their homes lit only by the faint glow of television news updates warning that an armed killer could be nearby. But as the search dragged on, doubts began to surface. No blood was found in the area where shots were fired. No footprints matched Stone's size or boots. Eventually, investigators concluded that the supposed sighting might have been a false alarm, either a misidentification or the result of panic spreading through an already terrified community. Still, no one could be sure. Stone was trained, resourceful, and desperate. It wasn't impossible that he had slipped through the chaos unnoticed. Back in Pennsburg, law enforcement ramped up efforts. The search had now turned into a massive, multi-agency operation involving local police, state troopers, the FBI, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Tactical checkpoints were set up on back roads, and officers patrolled on foot through the thick woods that surrounded the area. A police helicopter equipped with thermal imaging swept the region repeatedly, while drones were deployed to survey areas too dense for humans to navigate. Authorities issued warnings urging residents to stay inside, lock their doors, and avoid traveling unless absolutely necessary. Schools across Montgomery County and nearby districts were closed for safety, leaving parents uneasy but relieved. On social media, people shared rumors and unverified sightings: a man walking near the creek, a flashlight in the woods, a voice calling out for help, though none of these leads panned out. The fear was palpable. Even seasoned officers admitted they had rarely seen a community so gripped by collective dread. As the long night turned into morning, the once bustling streets of Pennsburg were silent. The hum of police radios, the distant barking of dogs, and the thump of helicopter blades overhead were the only sounds breaking the stillness. The man they sought was a ghost, a man who had methodically planned a massacre and then melted into the shadows. It wasn't until the following day, December 16th, that the search came to an end. Around mid-morning, officers discovered a patch of disturbed snow in a wooded area less than half a mile from Stone's home. Near the edge of the forest, partially hidden beneath a pile of leaves, they found him. Bradley William Stone, the man who had unleashed so much destruction, was dead. At first, investigators believed he had taken his own life through self-inflicted stab wounds. His body was found near a blood-stained machete and a double-bladed black axe, both eerily placed beside him. Several empty pill bottles were scattered nearby, hinting that he may have overdosed. He was dressed in the same military-style clothing witnesses had described, brown and green fatigues, the kind that blended seamlessly with the Pennsylvania woods. But as the coroner began examining his body, inconsistencies emerged. The initial assumption that he had died from stabbing was quickly questioned. A preliminary autopsy revealed that the wounds to his torso were not fatal, superficial at best. Later toxicology reports provided the real cause of death, a lethal combination of trazodone, an antidepressant, MCPP, a metabolite of that drug, and risperidone, an antipsychotic commonly used to treat schizophrenia and severe mood disorders. The overdose had been intentional. Bradley had chosen to end his life not through violence, but through silence, alone, surrounded by the winter woods that had concealed him for nearly 2 days. When investigators searched the area more thoroughly, they found subtle signs that he had been there for a while. A small patch of flattened snow where he likely lay down, traces of vomit nearby, and pill residue in the soil. It was as if he had come to the woods to disappear, to let the noise of the world fade away. The scratches on his face and neck, the gashes on his legs, and the empty medication bottles painted a haunting picture of a man who had finally given in to the chaos that had consumed him. The news of his death rippled through Montgomery County like a shockwave. Some felt a grim sense of relief that the manhunt was over, that no one else would be harmed. Others were left with more questions than answers. How could a father who once spoke so lovingly about his daughters commit such horror? How could a veteran who served his country with honor end up turning his weapons on his own family? In the aftermath, the investigation into Stone's final days revealed a deeply troubled man spiraling out of control, one who had fallen through the cracks of a system meant to help him. His medications showed that he was under treatment for both depression and schizophrenia-like symptoms, yet records from the Veterans Affairs Clinic suggested that he had been cleared as someone who did not have self-destructive thoughts just a week before the killings. In the end, Bradley Stone's story became more than just another crime headline. It was a stark warning about what happens when unresolved trauma, untreated mental illness, and unchecked anger collide. And though the search for him ended in those quiet Pennsburg woods, the pain and questions he left behind would linger in Montgomery County for years to come, echoing in every courtroom, every therapy office, and every family haunted by the thought that they never saw it coming.